everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
It's Jeremy from Tested.
And we have been spending this week at Oculus Connect.
3.
The keynote was just this morning, last week for you guys, but we want to go over some of the announcements and some of our thoughts before we jump into a conversation with someone at Oculus and talk about some games.
Where to begin?
I know there's so much announced, not in terms of hardware though. So the hardware stuff, we did get a release date finally for Oculus Touch.
Yeah, not as soon as we hoped.
I know. Pre-orders October 10th, I
Monday,
believe.
right?
Yeah, so now basically you can pre-order. If you bought a Rift, you'll get a notification to pre-order, but it's going to come out December 6th.
Yes, so that's a little bit of a wait, but they did announce some other hardware that you can buy for the same date. There's some earbuds, which are interesting that they're now even opening that up to third parties.
Yeah, they released the CAD designs for the headset and also the port for the removable headphones. Current headphones can be removed. Why do you think they made their own earbuds?
Hard to say, right? Because they've been pretty proud of the one movement to get everything off. The earbuds you're going to have to take out and insert. They will sound better. They're going to have a better frequency range, I think, just because, one, they're going to block out the rest of the sound, and two, they just have closer access to your eardrums, and the earbuds just sound pretty good, although some people aren't going to want to block out the entire world. Maybe some people do. It'll be interesting to see how those sell. They'll be $49, and they're saying that they sound great. Like, they're claiming $900 earphone equivalency.
Right, and I've always been happy with the Rift's current audio solution, which is the headphones sound good, but also they let me listen, be aware of the outside world.
You can flip them up if you need more
flip
access.
them up, exactly. So I don't know, I want to test that and see whether I'll be switching back and forth or whether it's going to be worth that $50 purchase.
Right. I wonder if somebody will just use their new open source CAD stuff to create a headphone jack, right? And just be like, hey guys.
Yeah, almost like a dongle for like the iPhone has, except for 3.5 millimeter. So the other hardware that will go on sale when Touch goes on sale is the camera. Touch will come with a second camera. So when you have Touch in the Rift, you'll have 2 cameras set up. Their ideal setup is 2 cameras in front of you. They did say on stage that you can do 2 cameras opposite, but for true room scale, they're saying 3 cameras.
They want 3, yeah. Isn't that interesting? Because I did talk to some devs yesterday who had a 3-camera setup. And they were saying that everyone still has to design for 2 cameras. So games won't require 3 on the box, but apparently some people are going to want that extra added layer of fidelity, especially if you're playing a game that requires you to spin around, face the other direction, and maybe if you're a person that, like me, you're playing certain games that where you could stay planted, you tend to spin around anyway. So I could see people doing that. Doesn't the SDK even support 4 cameras?
It supports, plenty of cameras, and they have some setups here with their mixed reality camera system, just tons of those cameras. The interesting thing for me is this camera, like where are you going to put it in your room? Many people's, the back wall is pretty far away. Do you have to put that as ideally, on a tripod, on a C-stand behind you?
People want a permanent solution, right?
Exactly.
And that's a long cable to run.
Yeah.
That's the thing, like with the other guys, with the HTC Vive, there's lighthouses just plug into the wall. It's just all they need is power. With these, they actually need a USB jack.
And need to plug into your computer, and if they're the same cameras that are currently bundled with the Rift and what's going to come with the Touch, then I don't think that cable is going to be any longer, so you'll need some kind of extender to get it all the way out there. And again, it takes another USB port. That's $80, also comes out December 6th. No other new hardware announcements, but they did show a prototype, so this is exciting.
Yeah. Did they? We saw a short video of a prototype.
Very short video.
The prototype, but so they're developing some sort of, wireless headset that is a mix between the Rift and the Gear VR. So you got wireless motion tracking with something that looks akin to a Rift with the cable cut off of it.
Right. And what you can see in the video is there's a lot of hardware packed in the back of it, computational power. The way it's going to be like the Gear is that it's going to run everything locally. I don't think this is a wireless video solution to beam video. I think they're doing local processing. Again, it's just speculation.
But it is inside-out motion tracking, right?
It is.
They made a big point of that, and that would be a huge leap.
Yeah, so inside out meaning that they're using just cameras or sensors on the headset itself to scan the outside world, kind of like what Google does with their Project Tango or Tango smartphones. Traditionally, that's been really tough to do on a smartphone Gear VR type solution because that drains a lot of power quickly and it's very hot. So to do that in real time and get the kind of experience you would expect out of the full PC hardware is a technical challenge.
Yeah, a year ago, Carmack himself said that he wished that this was further ahead by that point in time. And I believe he's been one of the people working on this project, so it'll be fun to see what he says now that the keynote's over.
Yeah, it's just good to know they're actually working on it, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot they're going to talk about that. So software. I think this Oculus Connect was really about the new software they've been making, both for their platform and for the games. On the platform side, Mark Zuckerberg came out and showed some experiments they've been working on in social VR using Facebook.
Yeah. So there was a lot of avatar stuff that is very different than the avatars that they've unveiled that we'll talk about in a few minutes, the actual official avatars. Very colorful, very cartoony, and everyone's customizing their own, but they're getting together in spaces, and it's pretty cool. Like they're transporting groups of people having conversations to different environments, and then they're drawing things in midair and then grabbing them and using them like swords with each other. One clever thing was Zuck got a phone call from his wife, and he took the call in VR, and everyone could see like the face. What are they? It's not FaceTime, obviously.
It's their messenger,
right.
Facebook Messenger.
And so everyone could engage with her and see her in this virtual space. And then they took a selfie in VR of Priscilla and Zuck, and using a selfie stick and all virtual reality. It was just really cool to see them experimenting with what could be done in a virtual space.
And what you're talking about is that they have a virtual camera represented, and that's being rendered and processed out and then sent over the internet so that someone on their phone using Facebook Messenger can look into the virtual environment.
Right, and the person in VR doesn't have to leave it.
Right,
like,
exactly.
He's trying to let you stay in there as long as you want. And of course, there's a one-button post to Facebook.
Yeah, of course. And the environments you mentioned earlier they were sharing included 360 video, included live streams.
I didn't see any 3D environments though, did you?
No, there were 3D objects in like that space, but not 3D environments.
Right.
And the avatars themselves had gestures and had expressions, and we don't know how those expressions were activated. Were they shortcuts? It didn't seem like they were being reactions based on what people were actually doing with their eyes and faces.
Well, that would be awesome, but that would require a new level of face tracking that isn't in the current generation.
Yeah.
They've got to be using current gen tech for this stuff. It looked to me like you could control your expression with an analog stick or something like that, like way up for super happy or way down for scared, things like that.
They're calling this explorations and experiments in social VR, but what's actually going to be a product, and they announced, is avatars for the Oculus Rift, a new revamped matchmaking system, social system, the ability to create rooms and get parties in a room together to chat.
Like 1 billion permutations of the avatars you could choose from.
It's a character creator.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's an RPG.
It's interesting though because they're sticking with that lo-fi, flat shaded, not textured look to the avatars, which I think is a smooth move. That's the right way to go because you don't get to the uncanny valley level at that point. It's just supposed to represent the person, and they're using as many expressions as we actually can create with out of the box VR right now.
And that feature, avatars, rooms, parties, it's not going to be out till I think early next year. It's going to come out on Gear first, I believe.
And then the Rift, yeah. It's cool that it's built into the SDK level now, though. So this is an avatar that any developer can use within their own app, and that's great. And the idea is you'll be able to recognize your friends even at a distance. Right.
And that I know people doing VR research. The idea of avatar creation is tough.
Yeah.
You have only so many points you're tracking. You want to make sure everyone has the same system, same camera system, and then you need to make sure they can be designed, the silhouettes can be designed so they're recognizable near and far with the resolutions that we have. So I know you have a lot of questions, I have a lot of questions, and hopefully we're going to speak to someone who has some answers for us with Oculus. So let's jump to an interview and then we'll come back and talk about some games. All right, guys, so here we are with Nate Mitchell, VP of Product at Oculus, for our biannual check-in.
Yeah, that's about right.
That's right. So big keynote this morning. You guys announced a lot. I want to start right off with this prototype that you guys showed off.
Santa Cruz.
It's called Santa Cruz. Yeah, sticking with these location names. Tell us about the development of this prototype, what the goals are. I know it's not a product, but what were the targets here and what were you able to achieve?
So Santa Cruz is a feature prototype. We've had a lot of feature prototypes in the past that we've shown. Crystal Cove, Crescent Bay. And for us, Santa Cruz is all about demonstrating inside-out tracking. And for those of you that don't know, I'm sure you know, Norm, outside in is the way that we use, that we achieve tracking on Rift. So we have a sensor on your desk, it tracks the Rift headset, it provides a really robust, high-quality tracking experience. Inside Out is a technology that we're really excited about that enables all sorts of new things. For one, Mark talked about, Inside Out, just to explain it just a little bit more, we have basically sensors on the headset that track outward the scene around you and then let you move through the space with positional tracking, just as if you had sensors like around the room.
Now when you say sensors, do you mean cameras? Do you mean things that track fiducial markers? They look like lenses on there, so it looked like 4 cameras to me.
So we're not talking too much about the exact sensors, but these sensors are basically just tracking the space around you. You saw the Santa Cruz prototype, no QR codes or fiducial markers around the room. This is using basically natural features.
And one of the things that's been difficult about mobile VR and getting some type of room inside-out tracking is the power consumption, the heat. It's a lot of processing power. People do it with stereo cameras. How are you avoiding those problems?
We're not going into too many of the details here at the show. So really, we want people focused on the experience that they can have in the device. And Mark talked a lot about how we're investing. We really see standalone as a pretty compelling category and that we're going to continue to invest in. And as we move forward, we'll definitely have more to share on what a product might look like.
Right, so it's really just the exploration of a feature, not something that's necessarily going to replace the Rift.
That's right. And yeah, and just for a little context there, I think Rift is this incredibly compelling, high-fidelity, high-end VR experience. That's sort of our high-end. On the lower side, you've got Gear VR, super affordable, awesome. There are 400 apps on the Gear VR store today, which is just incredible. And for $99, it's the best way to start out in VR. But there's this sweet spot in the middle of a product that's very accessible, that's portable, that's lower cost than necessarily the all-up, high-end Rift package. And we're really excited about over time exploring that category more.
Now, do experiments in inside-out tracking negate then the idea of doing wireless video transmission as a possibility for mobile VR?
Not at all. I would just say that when we think about standalone as a category, we like to we want to give people the sense that you can have an all-in-one experience, and that is like the demo you're seeing here. There's no PC streaming or anything like that. This is all compute on the headset. That doesn't preclude the idea of something like that in the future. That's just not what we're showing today.
And as you're testing that, is that both indoors and outdoors? Is that the vision for standalone?
So standalone, we want it to work. We talk about tracking quality a lot, and we want it to be reliable and robust. The reality is we're never going to hit 100% tracking coverage probably with sort of an inside-out solution. But we do think we can make it really, really good. So almost anywhere that you feel like you have the urge to pull out the standalone device, that we can make it work in that environment. But it does depend on the environment. Less so about sort of inside, outside, and more about what's around you and what can we actually track.
Now, when you talk about a headset that does all the computation in the headset, it's a lot of processing power. And one of the technologies you guys announced is Space Warp.
Yes.
I assume that's going to go in there. Can you tell me more about Space Warp and how that's maybe different than Time Warp for developers to use?
So I'm actually not the expert on Space Warp, and I'm not even going to try to do a poor job of explaining it. But basically, asynchronous time warp was a technology that we released on Rift and Gear VR, actually, that basically allows us to use synthetic frames, basically interpolating between frames, to fill in judder. And when basically the app's performance might drop, we can actually fill in the frames and keep it a great experience. And because of that technology, on Gear and on Rift, we have one of the absolute best sort of VR experiences out there. If you stack us up against any other,
You described it as insurance on stage,
yes,
right? In case of drop frames, but it seems to me that Space Warp, what was showed there is that you can double 45 to 90.
Yes.
So is a target then lower for developers?
So what I was just talking about was all time warp.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Space Warp basically allows the app to run at 45 frames a second. We inject these synthetic frames, similar, although they're produced differently, and we then basically get you back up to 90. So yes, what we've done with Space Warp is that now with Space Warp, we are we are introducing a new minimum specification that lets you play all the content on the Rift store on these new min-spec machines. And the new min-spec machines start at $499.
Now, would that apply even going forward, like what Space Warp applied for a 90 FPS game to introduce more frames if you have panels that then get higher refresh rates?
So I believe it can be used that way, but for right now, it's more about creating a deeper sort of sense of insurance. If you're on like a 970, if you're on a rec spec machine today, then asynchronous Space Warp is just going to give you an even better experience, but it also, again, sort of enables this new spec, this lower spec, to get into VR and have a great experience in the first place.
Does it work alongside Time Warp, both things at once? Okay, so it's not just one or the other.
As far as I know, yes.
Very cool.
Hopefully the engineers on the team are not watching this video like, oh, that wasn't right.
So some of the things you did announce also for hardware-wise, you guys have an accessory now for the Rift. You replace the headphones,
the earphones.
Earphones.
That's right.
And what was the reasoning behind that? Because the position that you guys have had is the headphones have been great.
So we have so many audiophiles on the team, and they were really, I mean, we designed Rift originally to have these removable connectors so that we could have all sorts of different audio accessories that people, could bring themselves, or also just to unhook the earphones and bring your own, full-on headphone solution. So we wanted a solution that gave you an even more immersive experience. And really a big part of that is great noise canceling, and then also sort of that rich audio soundscape. So we have some incredible audio engineers on the team who architected these, who built them from the ground up for Rift, tuned for VR. They are awesome. Brendan is one of the biggest fans, as you could probably tell during the keynote. But yeah, we're really, really excited about the quality, and we're hoping to see other people actually build their own Rift audio accessories. We just released sort of the CAD for those audio connectors and the facial interfaces. To see what other people do.
But no plans for a headphone jack. I mean, that's for someone to make.
Yes, potentially.
All right. And another accessory that you guys have coming out along with that is the camera. It's an accessory now.
A third sensor.
Yeah, third sensor. So can you tell me the difference between two sensor front-facing, the three sensor setup that you guys showed on stage, which is two in the front, one in the back, and maybe the difference between putting two cameras on the opposite sides of the room?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple configurations that you can use with touch. The default one that we recommend for everyone that has, we think is by far the deepest market penetration, the biggest audience, two front-facing cameras.
Yep.
Now, two front-facing cameras gives you a pretty wide tracking volume, and you want that extra sensor for touch because you can imagine kind of moving around in this space. Now, if you want a 360 experience, we have this sort of advanced experimental mode where you can put one sensor here and one sensor sort of over here behind you, and you can get a pretty good 360 experience. Again, you can move around a little bit. So what we wanted to do is basically introduce the option to have a third sensor. Now you can bring a third sensor and you can kind of position these almost as you see fit, although there's sort of an optimal distance between them all, an angle to minimize occlusion. And then you can really have a pretty rich room scale experience and roam around the scene and have a great time.
And the software supports even more than that right now. So if you want to plug 4 in, would that work?
That is correct. So you can actually plug 4 in. What we found in our testing is that 2 for 360 is good. 3 really gives you a pretty darn good tracking volume. 4 is sort of like, at least based on our data, is a bit of overkill. But absolutely, if the more sensors you add on, the better the tracking quality gets.
And those take USB ports, a little bit of computational power. Is the sensor that you guys are selling the same length USB cable as what comes with the Rift and the Touch?
Oh man, I don't want to eat my words on this one, but I believe we are going to include a USB extension cable as part of the package.
And if not, that's something people can buy and they can extend.
Absolutely.
But the idea is that you want to have it behind you in
Absolutely.
your optimal configuration.
Absolutely.
All right, now something that the newer project is Oculus Home. And you guys, last time I chatted with you, asked, when are we going to be able to tweak Home, add more stuff? And now you guys are announcing avatars, parties, rooms. How does that all work? Is that going to be built into Home or a separate application?
So for the most part, these are separate applications, but they're all sort of tied together, right? Home we see as your just like jumping off point for any VR experience that you're going to have on the platform. So you drop into Home, you might see that I'm online. You can invite me to a party. You can be like, Nate, what do you want to play? Then maybe we actually jump into Oculus Rooms, which is this new social experience where we can actually meet up together in VR. So let's say we meet up in Rooms. We actually have a table inside Rooms we call the Coordinated App Launch Table. It's a pretty high-tech name, but basically you drop in there, we can see what apps you and I both own, and we can be like, wow, we're like both big Dragonfront players. Why don't we actually go play that? We can click Dragonfront, we can instantly launch up into that experience, and all of this happens pretty seamlessly. So Home's evolution is still ongoing. The avatar editor's in there. You can access Home Rooms from there. You can access your friends and your parties list. And we have a bigger vision for the evolution of Home over time. But one
step at a time.
That's exactly right.
And the explorations experiments that Mark Zuckerberg showed on stage, in terms of Facebook, those are separate than the avatars.
Those are separate. Yeah, very much so.
But he's talking about being able to create items, gestures. Are these ideas that you want to bring into Home and avatars in the room? Make a lot of sense.
Absolutely, we share a big part of our vision is shared across the teams. So where we take Home and where they take that experience, I think you'll see a lot of parallels.
Now, when you talk about Room and avatars launching as separate applications, these are still siloed executables, programs. But you also announced WebVR.
That's right.
Completely feels like a little more open thing.
Yeah.
What's the potential there? How do developers interact with that? And what are those WebVR experiences going to be like compared to dedicated PC experiences.
Yeah. So basically, the VR web is something that's really exciting to us, which is basically this concept of exactly like you're talking about, all these sort of web destinations that are spatial, right? That you can actually step inside and be there in VR, and having them all connected together, just like the World Wide Web today. So developers have started developing VR experiences for the web using WebVR, and that's an evolving industry standard where that basically interfaces VR systems to browsers. Now, what we're doing is we're releasing a brand new framework called React VR that makes it incredibly simple to build these experiences to begin with. We're also going to be developing a VR browser, which we've codenamed Carmel.
Is that a content browser or a web browser?
It is a web browser. And basically you'll be able to jump from destination to destination and drop into this sort of endless set of VR experiences all instantly.
And there's no barriers for publishing. Anyone who can develop
That's
it
right.
with it can publish it. One final question,
Yeah.
looking forward, a phrase that Michael Abrash uses, augmented virtual reality.
Yep.
How's that different than just augmented reality, and how does it fit into the vision of VR?
So I think when we look at our vision for AR and VR, we have approached it very much from a VR track, right? We have sort of gone after VR. We've tried to perfect VR, deliver the absolute best VR products. And while there's a lot of shared technology, they are very different sort of products today, right? If you compare, for example, like a HoloLens to a Rift, they're very different sort of tech stacks. Over time, we think that these things are going to get closer and closer together. And one of the things that we're excited about is bringing more and more sort of people and real things into the virtual space in a way that we don't think that many people are thinking about today.
You need a camera for that.
You need a lot of different sensor technology for that. And this is all stuff that we're thinking about in a big way. I mean, Abrash sort of was talking about this 5-year outlook on the VR industry and what that future might hold. We have a lot planned, and it's going to be, as you know, very, very exciting over the next few years to see all of that come to life in products that we ship to you guys.
All right. Well, thanks for the updates. Can't wait over the next 5 years. Hope we'll have more of these check-ins.
Yeah.
Until then, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Norm. Great to see you.
All right, Jeremy. So we just came back from a chat with Nate, and if you guys didn't figure it out, big surprise, in between filming that intro, and now I got to try the Santa Cruz prototype.
Very exclusive.
Oh my goodness.
No one else was allowed in the room. Obviously no cameras, but not even somebody watching.
Yeah, so let me describe exactly what happened. What they have at the convention center here is a meeting room set up to look like a bedroom. Had a carpet on the ground. It was about maybe 6 feet by 15 feet, and it was set dressed. So you had table, you had pictures on the wall, you had shelves. It looked like, in wallpaper, it looked like someone's bedroom. No bed, and no big pieces of furniture. So mostly the carpet.
Okay.
And when I walked in, they handed me from the table the standalone prototype, what Mark Zuckerberg showed on stage, what we talked about earlier, which is their experiment into inside-out tracking.
Right. What's the code name?
Santa Cruz.
Okay.
Yeah, so just like they had the Crescent Bay prototype. So not a real product yet, but really their exploration of what it means to have tetherless VR that's not video transfer.
Right, so many questions. I mean, how was the tracking, first of all? Did you notice any kind of latency or lag or blurriness when you moved your head around?
The tracking I thought was fantastic.
Like Rift level fantastic?
Based on the demo, yes. So to describe the demo, if you've seen the Dream Deck, which is that series of vignettes the Oculus released when the Rift first came out, one of the vignettes was this kind of tiny model town.
Yeah.
There was a fire truck, the building on fire. It looked like you were looking at a God view. This demo was that town blown up, so you were in the town, but it was very, flat shaded, low poly environment.
Right.
So that told me immediately the computer hardware they had strapped to the back of this headset.
Oh, there's like a little computer on the back of your head now because they don't need those IR
They don't.
LEDs anymore.
Yeah, and that triangle in the back, there's a computer, it sticks out a little bit. There's a fan there, an active fan, a LiPo battery stuck over with the Velcro. That told me that computer wasn't, a GTX 970. They weren't rendering things that were PC level. It was more mobile level graphics.
Okay, so like Gear VR level graphics, but with tracking.
Exactly. And connected to that computer was an HDMI cable and a USB cable, which then went to what looked like a very standard Rift. Now, in the front was the only part where we can tell it wasn't a Rift because it didn't have IR trackers. It was still matte black. But you can tell in the 4 corners of the headset, flush to the chamfers of the headset, lenses, tiny lenses. It's a couple millimeters across.
So they have to be cameras.
I think they're cameras. and they're looking out the world. So the first thing I did, obviously, was try to block the cameras. And I put my hands up here, and I moved around, and it was still tracked positionally because, as they told me afterward, it's very difficult to block all 4 cameras. Positional tracking with the system works with even 3 of the cameras blocked and 1 camera seeing the world.
You're not talking about just rotational. You're actually moving through the space, and it was tracking that?
Yes.
With some of them blocked?
With some of them blocked. I assume some of them blocked because my hands are up here.
Okay.
Now, you made a point about them not letting anyone else in the room. Like, you couldn't watch the demo while I took the demo.
Right.
We think that's because this is still a prototype, and any movement by other people in the room, like if you were in the room with me and you were trying to get up in my face, that would break the tracking.
It's just so early in development. This is just held together as tightly as they can at the moment. I'm sure that they don't want anybody else walking in the room because maybe they've scanned the room for all we know. Like this is an environment that the cameras know and recognize, and if anything new comes in there goes your tracking.
Which is exactly how something like Project Tango works. Like you can improve this computer vision system. There's a lot of high contrast objects here, no fiducial markers in the room, but like white walls with black frames around things that would make it easy for computer vision to analyze. The lighting was very even, very bright, not a ton of cast shadows. And while there were about 5 people in the room with me giving me the demo, putting the headset on my head, when I took the headset off, only 2 of those people remained. So I think people left the room, they didn't want to get in the way of the tracking.
Right.
So that tells me that it's still a work in progress.
Oh, well, yeah, obviously.
The other thing I noticed, I tried to move my head around very quickly, forward and back very quickly. I did notice what I think are the effects of their new space warp, asynchronous space warp.
Well, that makes sense because they're going to be running it as low as possible. So they're probably going at that 45 hertz and then upping it with space warp to 90.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And people who've used the Rift and even Gear VR know that time warp, there's some telltale signs of time warp. When you move your head around really quickly or in a graphically intensive game, you see the world kind of skew just a little bit. And I noticed objects in the world had that kind of a little bit of wobbliness in the peripheral.
Right, but it doesn't drop frames or do anything nasty that gives you motion sickness, so at least you keep the comfort level.
It was still a full Rift experience in terms of the screen that was used from the lenses. It looked just like wearing the Rift. So that's Santa Cruz, and as you heard from me chatting with Nate, it's just one of the ways they're exploring inside-out tracking. Don't know if it's going to work outdoors. What they had was a very controlled environment. Not just an environment, but even the people in the environment.
Well, that's exciting. I wonder how soon that can possibly be a product. Like maybe a year from now?
Yeah.
I don't know.
They had a 5-year roadmap, and it's going to be hopefully pop up in some form in the next 5 years. Now, the other thing we want to talk about were the games. They did announce a bunch of touch-exclusive games funded by this $250 million seed money with Oculus Studios. And stuff that were pretty high quality. So we have videos out that you guys should watch about what I think are maybe the best games here so far. Lone Echo.
Lone Echo, man, we're diving right to the best one. I mean, that was my personal favorite of the entire show. And honestly, I'd never heard of it before we came in here. And we tried this single player the first day. That was really fun. It has a very interesting movement mechanic where you're grabbing the world in a zero-G environment and thrusting yourself through and then floating until you grab something else. Very little, no motion sickness for me, which is really surprising given that I get motion sick pretty easily. So it's just a matter of getting that. I think it's a matter of, first of all, they don't let you rotate your body ever. So that's important to reduce motion sickness. But also just the instantaneous stopping when you come to a halt. There's no deceleration. It's all human controlled. So when I accelerate, it's all my movement too. So I'm always connected to that movement, and then it continues at a constant rate. They've really nailed it, and I'm super excited with the multiplayer that we tried today.
Ender's Game, multiplayer, 5v5 in an arena that you can grab and throw yourself around, use thrusters, boosts, stop whenever you want to grab a disc and throw it into a goal. It was incredible fun, and there was a great social aspect to it too, using the microphone, hearing your teammates, knowing who's talking to throw the disc to them, pass to them, bank it off a wall.
I've never had a social experience like this. I mean, Zuckerberg must be nuts about this alone because this was the best social experience I've ever had in virtual reality. I got in there and my captain Dave, came over and he introduced himself and taught me how to use the interface and taught me how to get out of this, the starter, whatever it was that I was in, and then taught me how to move through the space, and then he started engaging with the other guy, and I was practicing, and it was just like I was talking to these guys, and then we had to collaborate, and we had to here, I'm going to pass you the disc, and then he would grab it, and then You can thrust yourself off other people. Like there's a maximum velocity you can travel at if you just throw yourself off of something. But if you throw yourself off something that's moving, i.e. another person, you can actually go faster, and then you can multiply that.
Wow.
And we were doing that together. The best fun. I mean, and we were flying all over in 0G in every single direction. And when I got out of that, I just felt so elated. I was buzzed.
Right.
I can't wait to play this game.
And I think the social aspect here, it wasn't just like voices in your head, like over comms. You saw a robot representation of a person.
Yeah.
They had IK. So when your captain flew up to you and flew around, you recognized that's the person I'm talking to.
Yeah.
It's also a very good point that they don't let you rotate yourself. So you can never flip yourself upside down in the world. When you grab onto an object, it's just translational movement over those 3 axes, but you don't get any rotation or tilt.
Yep, we were one of the guys in our team. He couldn't figure out how to turn around. He was like, "How do I do that?" And our captain said, "Turn around."
You actually have to physically turn around.
That's it. So there's gonna be some getting stuck in your cords, but man, it's worth it.
Yeah. So Lone Echo, I think my other favorite game from the show, Super Hot. I think the implementation of Super Hot in VR was just so delightful.
It was right as you expected it to be. We discussed on the podcast how they might figure that out. Because in Super Hot, as you move, in the old gamepad version, any movement causes time to transpire. And you're always kind of moving in VR. And we wondered if rotating would cost anything, and it doesn't. So you can look anywhere you want, you can aim anywhere you want.
But it's only actually moving through the space, moving your hands, translation movement, that accelerates time. Otherwise, time is almost at a standstill.
Yeah.
And it's a fun puzzle game. I also love that they have this mechanic, but they've built in this kind of narrative in replicating action scenes. And so as you progress your levels, you're playing through one sequence, one story almost.
Yeah, I dug that too. The new game that you had played, The Unspoken, before, I hadn't had a chance to play that before, and I was looking forward to it. That's, if I had a second favorite game of the show, definitely that one, and I'm super psyched. It's going to be free. They announced it's a bundle. It's a bundle and title with the Touch. Fantastic game. I mean, all of the magic that you're casting is augmented in front of you, and you have your shield, and all these different movements create different spells. And they're going to have multiple classes that you can play. They have 2 at the show, and they've alluded to having more, and they all have different effects and different spells that you can cast. I think that's going to be a blast. I can't wait to hop in that, and I think that's a good pack-in title. Yeah. Really graphically impressive, very fun just to like cast spells that actually have this huge effect in the world, and comfortable multiplayer.
Yeah, we see a lot of first-person games in VR shooters where they rely on gunplay, but this is superpowers in the form of magic, and that's so satisfying when you can cast a fireball, cast a shield, see the animation, and create a pose, and even use gestures to cast things into the world.
You know, sorry, I have to go back to Lone Echo, but when you mentioned superpowers, it's you can fly in it too. Like you have these thrusters on your wrists, and so when you activate them, whichever way your wrists are going, you start to go off in that direction. Super fun.
Another fun game that's actually a sitting game with touch is No, I Expect You to Die.
Yeah, that was an awesome DK2 demo. When that came out, that was like the best experience I'd had.
Yeah, and for the final version of this game will have, I think, 4 puzzles. They're basically, think of it as as one of those room puzzles, but in VR.
Yeah, you mean like escape room puzzles.
Escape room, exactly, where you're trying to figure out in the area around you, in your environment, whether you're trapped in a car, whether you're on an elevator or something, how to progress the narrative and unlock the next part of the puzzle.
Right. How many rooms did they say they would have?
4.
And every one of them could take a slow person like me an hour to solve. And I was totally stuck in this thing. I played it for like 15 minutes. But then when they explained to me what I was missing, I was like, that's really, really cool. I wish I'd figured that out on my own.
It's one of those games where you don't want to give hints to people playing it because even if it takes 45 minutes, an hour to solve one part of a puzzle, the longer it takes for you to solve, the more satisfying it is when you eventually do solve it.
Yeah, it also has the same kind of quality that Job Simulator has, where the world is full of interactive things, and they're all humongous. It's like building Lego with Duplo, because everything's just gigantic. That's what is easiest to interact with. It's a lot of fun.
What else? What do you want to mention in terms of games? Those are my big highlights, I think, from the show.
Well, I mean, Robo Recall is certainly going to be fun to play, and awesome that it's going to be free. I mean, that's really unexpected. Unfortunately, it's not a pack-in. It's not going to be ready at launch, but hopefully not too distant after the launch. I mean, they said next year, early next year.
And then VR Sports Challenge is going to be a pack-in.
They've totally revamped that into be touch. So that's and when you see that game, you're like, that's a natural fit for touch, and you wonder why there's gamepad in there and all. And I guess they decided the same thing.
Yeah, so that's going to have basketball, football, hockey with brawling, and even baseball, home run derby.
Yeah, 2 mini games for every game, and yeah, that's going to be. I think they're hoping to be the Wii Sports of touch, and there's a lot of variety in there. Be interesting to see which of those sports becomes like Wii Tennis, the one that everybody plays.
Yeah, so as you can tell, we have a lot to talk about from Oculus Connect and VR in general. Please subscribe to this channel and our podcast, where Jeremy and I will be discussing more about VR and our takeaways from Oculus Connect. But until next time, Jeremy and I will see you later. Whew.